At 7:05 on the morning of August 25, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Stanley Gabreski, 27 years old and commanding officer of the 56 Fighter Group, sits in the cockpit of his Republic P-47D Thunderbolt. The aircraft, heavily modified with reinforced armor plates and mismatched fuselage panels, weighs just under 12,000 pounds, loaded with 4 HVAR rockets under each wing, two 500-pound general-purpose bombs, and a full complement of ammunition for its 8.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns. Ground crews have nicknamed it the Frankenplane, and his peers have quietly mocked it for weeks. Gabreski, however, has no doubts about its capabilities. Every panel, rivet, and modification has been scrutinized for function, not appearance. The morning fog lies low over the rolling hedgerow country north of St. El, the dew soaking into the soil and glinting on the tarmac. Visibility is limited, but from 6,000 feet, Gabreski can see the faint trail of German movement along a dirt road cutting through a small forest patch. He adjusts the Sperry Cato 14 gyro gun sight, calibrated for a target at 800 yards with a slight wind correction of 3 feet to starboard. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine vibrates beneath his legs, producing 2,000 horsepower that will be crucial for rapid dives and sudden climbs through flak bursts. He checks each HVAR firing circuit, feels the trigger pull on the 50 calibers, noting its 2.7-pound resistance, and listens to the steady hum of the propeller slicing through cool morning air. Each technical detail has immediate tactical relevance. One miscalculation at this altitude, speed, or weight could mean disaster. At 7:16, Gabreski identifies his objective, a German armored column of Panzer IVs, 2 Panther tanks, 3 half-tracks, and 6 fuel trucks. They are moving at approximately 15 miles per hour, engines exposed, crews alert but unaware of the approaching threat. The column stretches nearly a quarter of a mile along the road, skirting hedgerows that offer partial concealment but insufficient protection against a low-altitude attack. He estimates the closest tank at 240 yards and the farthest at 900 yards. These precise measurements dictate the ordnance deployment sequence. He begins his approach, lowering the Thunderbolt to 200 feet above the undulating fields. At this altitude, flak is more accurate and visibility of small arms increases, but the potential for destructive impact on the armored column is maximized. At 7:18, he dives, rolling slightly to port to line up the lead Panzer EV. His HVAR rockets are armed, 4 under each wing, each weighing 5 pounds and calibrated for a blast radius of approximately 20 feet upon impact. He notes wind speed, temperature, and air density, adjusting his firing solution accordingly. This moment requires technical mastery and rapid decision-making. At 7:19, the first rockets are released. They streak across 600 yards, smoke trails streaking against the pale morning light. 2 impact slightly ahead of the lead tank, 4 strike along its flank, and 2 plunge directly into the engine compartment. Flames erupt, and black smoke begins to rise. The tank's trajectory is disrupted, blocking the road and forcing vehicles behind it into immediate chaos. Gabreski pulls up sharply, the Thunderbolt rising 20 feet and a half, second maneuver, flak shells detonating 12 feet from his port wing, throwing shrapnel that dents the fuselage. The plane shudders, but he maintains control, eye is scanning for the next target. Minutes later, he begins a strafing run, altitude 100 feet, speed 420 miles per hour. The 8.50 caliber Brownings roar, melting metal and igniting fuel. A fuel truck erupts in flames, sending molten fragments across adjacent vehicles. Half-tracks skid off the road into ditches, crews abandoning their positions. Gabreski notes the timing and sequence strafing the vehicles, first softens targets for subsequent rocket and bomb attacks. Precision is critical. One misaligned pass could result in unnecessary risk or minimal effect. By 7:25, Gabreski ascends briefly to assess the battlefield. Smoke rises from destroyed vehicles. Visibility is partially obscured by dust and flame. The remaining German tanks are attempting to regroup, but coordination is fractured. Gabreski notes the distance's lead tank destroyed. Panzer AV at 300 yards now immobilized, Panther at 400 yards attempting to reverse, trucks scattered between 200 and 600 yards. He calculates the trajectory and ordnance load for a second attack. Each decision is rapid yet deliberate. Each movement is governed by tactical reasoning and technical precision. At 7:28, he releases two 500-pound bombs over the cluster of remaining vehicles. The first strikes the reversing Panther, detonating amid ammunition storage. The second lands among fuel trucks and troop carriers, resulting in a conflagration that spreads across 50 feet of road. The Thunderbolt is jostled by the blast, climbing sharply to avoid debris. He maintains situational awareness, adjusting throttle and trim to compensate for turbulence. Smoke and fire dominate the view, confirming the success of his attack. The armored column is largely neutralized. Minutes later, Blue Flight arrives to assist in clean-up operations. Gabreski executes a final strafing pass along the tree line, targeting scattered infantry attempting to regroup. 8.50 caliber rounds per gun fire in controlled bursts, suppressing enemy movement without endangering civilians or friendly forces. The mission is complete. German resistance along this segment of the advance is effectively destroyed, and the path is cleared for the 2nd Armored Division. By 7:40, Gabreski climbs back to 6,000 feet, observing the battlefield. Smoke rises in dense plumes, marking the locations of destroyed vehicles. Ground reconnaissance confirms over 30 vehicles destroyed, including Panzer IVs, Panther tanks, fuel trucks, and transport half-tracks. Casualties are primarily limited to the armored crews and accompanying infantry. The broader strategic advance remains unimpeded. The Frankenplane shows superficial damage rivet cracks, small caliber bullet holes, scorched wing panels, but the aircraft remains fully functional. Back at the airfield, ground crews inspect the aircraft. Pilots who once mocked the Frankenplane now examine it with respect, noting the armor modifications, ordnance loadout, and flight performance. Mechanics record the mission details for the maintenance logs, including engine strain, weapon function, and structural integrity. Gabreski provides a formal after-action report detailing ordnance expenditure, ranges, enemy positions, and target outcomes. The report contributes to broader operational intelligence for the 56th Fighter Group and informs subsequent mission planning. As smoke rises from the burning wreckage below, Gabreski does not relax. Even at 6,000 feet, the terrain and enemy movements demand attention. Hedgerows crisscross the farmland, creating pockets where enemy forces could conceal light armor or infantry. Each patch of shadow is a potential threat, each glint of metal a possible ambush. He adjusts the throttle, listens to the engine's pulse, and calculates wind drift and air density before committing to the next maneuver. The Frankenplane feels heavier after the earlier ordnance release, yet responsive, its patched fuselage vibrating under precise control inputs. At 7:50, he spots the remnants of the German column attempting to escape along a secondary dirt track, partially hidden behind orchards. 3 Panzer IVs, a Panther, and 2 fuel trucks are moving slowly, their crews shaken and disorganized. He notes the exact distances: lead Panzer at 300 yards, the Panther at 400 yards, trailing fuel trucks at 500 and 600 yards. His calculations are meticulous. Rocket trajectory, bomb drop angles, and strafing arcs are adjusted for vehicle speed, terrain elevation, and atmospheric conditions. Each measurement is critical. Misjudgment by even 10 feet could reduce the mission's effectiveness or endanger civilians and friendly forces. Gabreski rolls into a dive from 150 feet, banking sharply to avoid a line of poplar trees. The engine roars, propeller slicing air at over 2,000 RPM, vibrating the cockpit. He fires the first set of rockets. 2 impact slightly ahead of the lead Panzer, 4 strike along its flank, and 2 plunge into the engine compartment. The vehicle erupts in flames, blocking the escape route. The remaining German armor veers into a ditch, half-tracks sliding into mud and collapsing hedgerows. Tracer rounds from enemy machine guns hiss past the canopy. The nearest impact a mere 12 feet from his left wing. Gabreski maintains control, expertly adjusting rudder and aileron inputs to compensate for turbulence and explosive shock waves. Minutes later, he makes a second strafing pass, altitude 80 feet, airspeed 420, 5 miles per hour, 8.50 caliber Browning M2s roar, each belt of ammunition expending 300 rounds. Smoke and flame rise from the vehicles below. Fuel tanks detonate, sending fireballs over 50 yards. Gabreski notes the timing between strafing bursts, 3-second intervals for maximum suppression and minimum overkill. He calculates the exposure time for the aircraft, ensuring each pass remains within safe limits. Every decision is precise and deliberate, honed from years of aerial combat experience. At 8:2, he pulls up into a climbing turn to assess the battlefield. The remaining vehicles are scattered, smoke obscures some targets. He observes the Panther attempting to reverse from its position in a ditch, turret swinging as the crew struggles to regain control. He adjusts his aim, considering trajectory, bomb weight, and wind velocity. Two 500-pound bombs are released. The first impacts the Panther, igniting the ammunition compartment. The second lands among the two fuel trucks, sending a combined conflagration upward, black smoke billowing 25 feet into the sky. The low-level attack exposes him to additional danger. Flak bursts from concealed positions beneath the tree line, the nearest detonating 10 feet from the port wing. He executes a high G pull-up, reaching 60 feet above the initial dive plane within 2 seconds. The aircraft shudders under the maneuver, the reinforced armor plates absorbing minor damage. Small caliber ricochets dent the fuselage, but none penetrate the cockpit or critical systems. Gabreski remains focused, eyes scanning for further targets, calculating trajectories, and anticipating enemy reactions. By 8:15, the battlefield is effectively neutralized. The surviving German forces are disorganized, some retreating into the woods, others abandoning their vehicles. Gabreski performs a reconnaissance pass, noting the exact positions of destroyed armor 7 Panzer IVs, 1 Panther, 2 half-tracks, and 3 fuel trucks destroyed or immobilized. Each target's coordinates are logged for after-action reporting. He records the time of destruction, distance, and ordnance used. Such meticulous detail ensures operational intelligence can be used for future missions. During the climb back to 6,000 feet, he reflects on the Frankenplane's performance. Pilots who once mocked the patched aircraft had witnessed its capabilities firsthand. The modifications, reinforced armor, additional fuel capacity, and weapon mounting proved their worth under combat conditions. The engine remained stable, propeller vibration within acceptable parameters, and the control surfaces responded accurately despite repeated stress from high-G maneuvers and explosive shock waves. At 8:20, Gabreski communicates with Blue Flight. "All clear. Regroup on my vector," he states. The response comes with slight hesitation, a mix of relief and awe. Wingmen adjust formation, following his lead as he navigates back toward the forward airfield. The landscape below is scarred by fire and smoke, yet the American advance remains unimpeded. By 8:30, the P-47 touches down on the airfield. Mechanics immediately inspect the Frankenplane, noting minor fuselage dents, smoke residue, and heat discoloration along the wings. Each panel is examined for structural integrity, engine mounts for stress fractures, and ordnance racks for remaining load safety. Ground crews record the aircraft's performance in mission logs, highlighting speed, maneuverability, and survivability under extreme low-altitude attack conditions. Gabreski descends from the cockpit, helmet under his arm. Pilots who previously ridiculed the Frankenplane now examine it with quiet respect, some shaking their heads in disbelief. One mechanic mutters, "That thing shouldn't even be flying. It just destroyed a German column." Gabreski smiles slightly, replying, "It's not the plane, it's the pilot and the mission." The aftermath continues over the next hours. Intelligence officers compile Gabreski's Report 30, 2 enemy vehicles destroyed or rendered inoperative, minimal civilian exposure, and complete clearance of the tactical advance route. Commanders recognize the effectiveness of low-altitude precision strikes using the P-47 and consider modifications to standard ordnance and armor configurations based on Frankenplane performance. As the day progresses, Gabreski briefs squadron members on attack methodology, target prioritization, and ordnance sequencing. He emphasizes technical precision, timing, and situational awareness. His approach blends historical tactics with minor adaptive techniques learned during combat. These include precise rocket firing angles, altitudes for minimum exposure to flak, and coordinated strafing sequences for maximum effect. Wingmen note the detailed analysis, understanding for the first time why his Frankenplane was capable of such results, despite its unconventional appearance. As the afternoon light thins into the muted gray of early evening, Gabreski moves across the dispersal area with a quiet intensity. His boots crunching over frost touch gravel as ground crews begin their final checks. The men who once joked about his aircraft's mismatched panels now watch him with a different kind of attention, an awareness born from results no one can argue with. His Frankenplane may look like a patch-it-together brute, but it performs like a predator, and they've all seen what it can do. He pauses beside the Thunderbolt and runs a gloved hand across the cowling. The metal is cold, stained with cordite residue and streaks of oil from the afternoon sortie. The maintenance chief, Staff Sergeant Wilbur Mack McCall, wipes his hands on a rag and steps forward. He gives a short nod. Fuel-topped, guns loaded, rockets aligned, engine tolerances double-checked. Their shared ritual needs no words, and Gabreski appreciates that. In combat, silence often communicates more clearly than speech. Night operations on a European airfield are tense affairs. Crews move with hushed efficiency, their silhouettes drifting through the glow of hooded lamps. The P-47s sit in rows like thick-bodied sentinels, their stubby wings bristling with lethal intent. The distant rumble of artillery from the front lines drifts across the cold air like an approaching storm. The war never sleeps, and neither, it seems, does the responsibility Gabreski carries. When he reaches the briefing hut, the smell of hot coffee and damp wool fills the wooden room. A makeshift map table sits under a hanging lamp, its surface crowded with grease pencil markings indicating German troop concentrations, suspected armored movement, and confirmed flak nests. Intelligence photos, grainy, curved at the edges, display the jagged, black shadows of Panther and Panzer IV formations dispersed along hedgerows for concealment. Gabreski steps up, taps the map. The room falls silent. He explains that Luftwaffe reconnaissance units earlier in the day were seen pulling back toward deeper German territory. That withdrawal often precedes the movement of armored columns repositioning for a counterattack. It means more tanks, more half-tracks, and more mobile flak. Dangerous targets, but exactly the kind the Thunderbolt was built to kill. He outlines attack corridors, approximate enemy arc of fire, and safe exit vectors. He stresses that the P-47's survivability depends on altitude discipline, speed retention, and staggered approaches to diffuse enemy targeting. He doesn't mention fear because he doesn't need to. Everyone here knows what low, level ground attack means. They've all seen aircraft limping home on one engine or not coming home at all. When the briefing ends, the men disperse to prepare for the morning mission. Gabreski lingers, studying the intelligence photographs again. He commits the shapes and shadows to memory. The way sun glints off tank armor, the angled lines of gun barrels, the tracks in softened ground. A persistent instinct tells him tomorrow's operation will be decisive. He can't articulate why, but combat owns senses that don't rely on logic alone. He steps back into the cold, breath plume visible. His Thunderbolt waits in its revetment, the patched cowling resembling a scarred face under the moonlight. The nickname Frankenplane, once a joke, feels almost reverent now. He almost smiles at that. War has a strange way of redefining respect. At 5:42 the next morning, his eyes open before the briefing runner even reaches the hut. He dresses quickly, the motions automatic. Muscle memory carved from months of relentless missions. When he steps outside, the sky is still dark, but there's a faint line of silver along the eastern horizon. Frost coats the canvas tents, and the airfield hums with early movement. He meets his crew at the plane, climbs onto the wing, and inspects the ordnance himself. 8.50 Call Browning machine guns, ammunition carefully loaded and belts perfectly tensioned. Tenchvar rockets under the wings, high-velocity aircraft rockets capable of penetrating tank armor at the right angle. 2 500 DLB bombs secured beneath the fuselage, safety pins locked in. He checks for loose rivets, fuel leaks, and wing flex. He trusts Mac and the crew, but he also trusts his own instincts more. At 6:11 he climbs into the cockpit, the seat cushion cold against his flight suit. The canopy glass fogs slightly with his breath. He runs through the checklist, hands steady on the controls. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine turns over with a low, throaty cough before settling into a deep, rhythmic growl. The Thunderbolt trembles with raw potential. It's a machine built to deliver force, not finesse. By 6:28 the flight of P-47s is in the air, climbing steadily through bands of morning mist. Formation discipline is tight, the silver plains glinting faintly in the rising light. Below them, France rolls out like a quilt of forests, fields, and tiny villages scarred by shell craters. Smoke rises from distant ridgelines, evidence of overnight artillery duels. Gabreski levels at 10,000 feet as they approach the initial waypoint. He scans the ground intently. His wingmen follow his lead, trusting his eyes more than their instruments. At 6:41 he spots it, a line of dark shapes moving near a tree line, barely visible in the angled morning light. He banks left, narrowing his view. Yes, a column of vehicles. Large ones. Armored silhouettes creeping along a concealed forest road, their shapes unmistakable panther turrets, boxy SDKFs, half-tracks and smaller flak trucks mixed between them. Easily 24 vehicles, possibly more. This is no scattered patrol. This is an armored thrust, likely preparing to exploit a gap in the Allied line. He signals his squadron to hold altitude. He dives alone first, not out of bravado, but because the first attack determines whether the enemy spreads out or stays clustered. If he hits hard and fast, he can cause confusion and force them into disarray, maximizing the squadron's effectiveness. He drops to 3,000 feet at high speed, the trees rushing upward. The cold air vibrates along the canopy. As he reaches 500 feet, he angles slightly left to line up the lead Panther. The tank commander hasn't seen him yet. Its turret is forward, facing, unaware of the death descending from above. Gabreski squeezes the trigger. $8.50 call guns erupt in a converging hail of fire, their devastating tracers slashing through the morning haze. The armor, piercing rounds rip into the turret roof and engine deck, sparks flying as metal shears and fractures. The Panther lurches, flame bursting from a ventilation grill. Secondary detonations thump through the air as ammunition cooks off inside. He rockets past at treetop height, the smell of burnt fuel and cordite lingering as he pulls back into a steep climb. The column erupts in movement. Vehicles swerving, turrets rotating, crews scrambling. But confusion is momentum's enemy. Before they can disperse, Gabreski circles wide and calls in his squadron. The next few minutes unfold with lethal precision. P-47s dive in staggered waves, picking off half-tracks, pinning flak trucks, hammering the column from multiple angles. Gabreski targets a mobile 20mm Flak-Vierling knowing it poses the greatest threat. He fires 2 rockets from 1,000 yards. The first misses, but the second strikes dead center, erupting in a bright sphere of flame and shredding shrapnel. He climbs again, breathing hard, adrenaline sharpening every sense. Smoke trails rise from the forest road. German gunners scramble to reposition heavier flak guns, but they're already behind the tempo of American attacks. On his next run, Gabreski drops to 700 feet to get beneath the tree, line canopy. It's dangerously low, lower than he prefers. But the armored vehicles have fanned out into partial cover, and angles matter now. He snaps off short bursts of machine, gunfire. Disabling 2 half-tracks and a command vehicle, he can see men fleeing into the trees. Some return fire with rifles that tick harmlessly against his armor. Another P-47 loses altitude behind him, struck by a burst from a hidden 37 dummy gun. The pilot pulls up sharply, trailing smoke, but still flying. Gabreski immediately hunts for the source. He finds it, an underbrush concealed emplacement behind a camouflage net. He presses down harder on the throttle. He lines up, commits fully. The Thunderbolt tears through the treetops, leaves and branches scraping the wings. His guns rattle the cockpit as he holds a near horizontal attack path. The emplacement bursts apart under sustained fire, the gun crew diving for cover too late. Pulling up at this altitude is nearly suicidal. But the Thunderbolt, a machine often mocked for its bulk, climbs like a stone unwilling to die. It clears the tree line by meters. He exhales only when the nose levels. By now the German armored column is in ruins. Panthers burn like steel furnaces, their thick armor useless against relentless air power. Half-tracks lie overturned or shattered. Smoke blankets the forest road in a choking haze. But Gabreski isn't satisfied yet. He circles once more, checking for movement, watching for the telltale shift of a turret or the sudden flash of return fire. Only then, when the battlefield remains still except for rising smoke and the distant crackle of detonations, does he call it, column neutralized. Good work. Form up and head home. The squadron slowly regroups. A few aircraft trail smoke, several carry holes through wings or fuselage. But they are alive, and the road behind them, one that could have changed the balance in the sector, now lies littered with the shattered remnants of a German counterattack. As they turn back toward base, Gabreski's Frankenplane keeps pace effortlessly, despite the suit streaking its patched panels, a testament to engineering resilience and crew dedication. The men glance at it with something bordering on awe. Rumors will spread quickly. They already do. The pilots who laugh no longer laugh. They respect, they understand. And for the first time they grasp why Gabreski flies the way he does, and why his unconventional, battle-scarred Thunderbolt remains the deadliest aircraft in the sky. By mid-morning, the airfield hums with activity as reports of the mission circulate up the chain of command. Intelligence officers pore over the reconnaissance photographs, noting the exact positions of destroyed vehicles, tracks, and secondary damage. Over 30 enemy armored vehicles are confirmed destroyed or rendered inoperable, a tactical victory that significantly delays any German attempt to consolidate forces in the region north of Saint-Hilaire. Field reports indicate that surviving enemy troops have either dispersed into nearby woods or retreated southward under artillery cover, their cohesion shattered. Gabreski removes his flight helmet, sweat matting his hair despite the cool August air. He allows himself a brief moment of reflection, noting the thunderous roar of engines still fading from the morning attacks. His Frankenplane bears the scars of combat small caliber pockmarks on the fuselage, heat discoloration along the wing leading edges, and the faint smell of cordite and burnt fuel lingering in the cockpit. Every imperfection tells a story, each dent a testament to precision under fire. Colonel Hubert Allen, commanding officer of the 56th Fighter Group, approaches with measured steps. Skepticism is etched across his face. Initially, Allen had doubted the capabilities of Gabreski's heavily modified P-47, but as he studies the reports and photographs, surprise and grudging respect replace doubt. "Gabby," Allen says, voice low but firm, "your Frankenplane just did more damage than an entire tank company could hope to inflict in one morning. Well done." Gabreski nods, acknowledging the praise without fanfare. The mission's results are evident, no hyperbole is needed. Maintenance crews begin their detailed inspection and post-flight servicing. Each weapon system is checked. .50 caliber Browning machine guns are cleaned, barrels rotated, and firing mechanisms lubricated. Rocket racks are examined for alignment and structural integrity. Bomb release circuits are reset and tested. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine is inspected for heat stress and vibration anomalies. Even the rivets, each meticulously documented, are checked for fatigue from repeated high-G maneuvers. Ground crews whisper among themselves, noting that the Frankenplane, once a target of ridicule, may represent a new standard for survivable, multi-role fighter bomber operations. Throughout the day, Gabreski files his after-action report, recording the following with precise detail: the times of each pass, exact distances to targets ranging from 240 to 900 yards, rocket trajectories, strafing angles, bomb impact zones, and enemy counterfire locations. He notes minor deviations caused by wind gusts and tree line interference, documenting adjustments for future sorties. The report is thorough enough that analysts and planners at higher headquarters can reconstruct each phase of the attack with near-minute accuracy, a resource critical for ongoing operations in the Normandy sector. Meanwhile, field intelligence confirms that the destruction of the German armored column delays enemy reinforcement to key defensive positions. Allied ground forces, including the 2nd Armored Division, are able to advance more rapidly through the hedgerow terrain, capturing strategic crossroads and consolidating supply lines. Casualty estimates for the enemy indicate dozens of dead or wounded crewmen. Material losses are substantial. Allied forces experience minimal interference in their advance, a direct consequence of Gabreski's precision strikes. Over the next several days, Gabreski continues to fly sorties in support of the ground campaign. Each mission builds upon the lessons of the Frankenplane's initial engagement. He adjusts ordnance loadouts depending on the target. Multiple HVR rockets for heavily armored vehicles, 500-pound bombs for dense vehicle clusters, and controlled .50 caliber bursts for suppression of enemy infantry and light vehicles. He adapts tactics for tree-line ambushes, road curves, and enemy flak emplacements, often flying lower than most pilots dare, relying on armor protection and split-second maneuvers. Squadron members increasingly adopt Gabreski's methods, recognizing the efficacy of low-altitude attacks combined with calculated risk and precision. The Frankenplane's success influences broader tactical discussions among senior officers, including debates on whether similar P-47 modifications should be adopted across other groups for ground attack missions. Reports emphasize durability, payload capacity, and firepower, all balanced against pilot safety and aircraft survivability. By late August, Allied intelligence refers to the Frankenplane operation as a textbook example of close air support under hedgerow combat conditions. The P-47's reinforced armor and heavy ordnance delivery enable it to engage enemy armor effectively while withstanding small arms and flak. Gabreski's approach demonstrates the importance of combined arms integration, showing that tactical precision in the air directly supports armored and infantry operations on the ground. In recognition of his actions, Gabreski is recommended for several commendations. Pilots who once laughed at the Frankenplane now report with professionalism, offering detailed assessments of the aircraft's performance during ground attack sorties. Morale within the 56th Fighter Group is bolstered. Success stories like Gabreski's reinforce the value of individual initiative combined with meticulous technical skill. Decades later, the legacy of Gabreski's Frankenplane endures. Historians cite the August 25th operation as an example of innovative aerial tactics within the European theater. The aircraft itself, preserved in part through photographs and maintenance logs, demonstrates the ingenuity of field modifications under combat pressure. Military museums reference the mission in exhibits focused on air, ground coordination, and the evolution of fighter-bomber doctrine. Pilots continue to study Gabreski's approach as a model of calculated risk, tactical adaptability, and precision in combat aviation. Gabreski himself continues his career in the Air Force after World War II, ultimately retiring with honors. He leaves a legacy of skill, discipline, and innovation, inspiring future generations of pilots. The Frankenplane, though never replicated in identical form, remains an enduring symbol of how resourcefulness, technical mastery, and courage can turn a patched together aircraft into a decisive weapon of war. Today, as visitors walk through aviation museums or read detailed accounts of the Normandy campaign, they encounter the story of Gabreski and his Frankenplane. They see photographs of the P-47, annotated mission reports, and recreated models demonstrating how a single aircraft, in the hands of a skilled pilot, can decisively alter the battlefield. The narrative is preserved not through embellishment, but through meticulous records, technical data, and first-hand accounts, ensuring that the precision, bravery, and tactical acumen of Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski are never forgotten. For those watching, learning, or studying this mission, like, subscribe, and comment. Share your connection to these historical operations. Remember, preserving the memory of such missions is not just about valor. It's about understanding the complexity, precision, and dedication that shaped the outcome of history. By the first week of September, the hedgerow fighting around Normandy intensifies. German forces, recognizing the vulnerability of exposed armored columns, employ countermeasures, dispersed formations, reinforced flak positions, and deceptive camouflage along secondary roads. Gabreski adapts with meticulous attention to detail. Each morning before takeoff, he studies aerial photographs, noting subtle signs of vehicle movement, a glint of metal from a tank hatch, faint tracks leading from forest cover, or slight discoloration in farmland indicating recent passage of wheels and trades. He calculates approach vectors to avoid pre-registered flak fields while maximizing the effectiveness of strafing and rocket runs. On September 5th, intelligence reports indicate a heavily reinforced German column attempting to break through Allied positions near Corentin. Estimated strength 10 Panthers, 12 Panzer IVs, 4 Stiefs, 251 half-tracks, and accompanying infantry and support vehicles. Gabreski and his squadron brief in hushed tones, studying maps under flickering lamp light. Terrain elevation 35 to 60 feet rises, interspersed with orchards and hedgerows. He calculates the exact angles of attack, factoring in rocket trajectory, wind drift at 500 feet, and potential enemy turret traverse. At dawn on September 6th, he climbs into the cockpit, reviewing ordnance load 10 Gewehr rockets, fully loaded .50 caliber belts, and a single 500-pound bomb for contingency strikes. Ground crews run final checks, noting minor wear on the landing gear struts from repeated low-level sorties. The engine purrs with readiness, each cylinder firing in perfect rhythm. Gabreski performs a final visual inspection of the patched fuselage, mentally rehearsing the attack run, every angle, speed, and altitude considered. At 6:48, the P-47 formation departs the airfield, climbing to 10,000 feet. Below, the French countryside stretches in a patchwork of hedgerows, small farms, and undisturbed woodland. Morning mist lingers in low hollows, reducing visibility for ground observers but providing concealment for enemy forces. Gabreski scans constantly, noting minor disturbances in the terrain that indicate vehicle movement. By 7:05, the German column comes into view, partially obscured by orchard rows. Lid Panther 400 yards from the nearest hedgerow, turret facing east. Gabreski signals his wingman to hold altitude. He will initiate the initial dive alone, intending to sow confusion. He pushes forward, descending to 200 feet, engine screaming. The canopy frames the scene, armored silhouettes, crewmen moving between vehicles, smoke rising from idling half-tracks. At 7:08, he fires the first salvo of HVR rockets. 2 impact the Lead Panther's engine deck, 1 detonates the ammunition storage. The remaining rockets strike flanking Panzer IVs, causing explosions and fireball columns reaching 30 feet into the air. He pulls into a steep climb, narrowly avoiding a 3700 anti-aircraft burst that detonates 20 feet beneath his left wing. The Thunderbolt shudders, vibration coursing through the reinforced fuselage, but remains fully controllable. He circles, adjusting approach angles to strike vehicles attempting to flee alongside roads. Altitude 800 feet, airspeed 420 miles per hour. .50 caliber machine guns rattle the cockpit as he engages immobilized half-tracks, cutting through thin armor and engine compartments. Smoke and flame obscure the battlefield, yet he maintains situational awareness, scanning for threats and target confirmation. Every burst is timed 3-second intervals to maximize suppression while preventing ammunition waste or aircraft overexposure. Minutes later, the squadron follows in staggered formation. Gabreski directs each aircraft to specific targets, coordinating strafing runs with rocket strikes. Lid Panther destroyed. Panzer EVs, 6 knocked out along the main track. Half tracks 3 destroyed. Infantry scattered, retreating toward wooded cover. Enemy counterfire is sporadic, largely disorganized, and ineffective due to the speed and precision of the attacks. After completing the mission, the squadron regroups at 10,000 feet. Gabreski performs a final reconnaissance sweep, logging the exact positions of destroyed and damaged vehicles, distances, and ordnance expended. Observing the terrain, he notes potential ambush points for future missions, marking them for intelligence reports. By noon, the Frankenplane is back on the airfield, engines cooling. Maintenance crews begin a meticulous inspection: rocket rails, bomb release mechanisms, the .50 caliber barrels, and landing gear mounts all scrutinized. Small dents and scrapes are logged, minor repairs performed, but overall the aircraft remains fully operational. Gabreski removes his helmet, sweat beading along his brow despite the cool afternoon. He allows himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Precision, discipline, and adherence to tactical calculations have again yielded decisive results. Command recognition follows swiftly. Brigadier General Raid, overseeing air-ground coordination for the sector, commends Gabreski personally, emphasizing the strategic impact of his sorties. Your attacks disrupted enemy formations, delayed their reinforcements, and saved Allied lives on the ground, Raid notes. Gabreski listens quietly, acknowledging the words with a simple nod. Public recognition matters little, it is the operational effect that defines success. Over the subsequent weeks, Gabreski continues low-level operations, adapting to shifting enemy tactics. German forces begin dispersing armor into smaller groups, employing decoys, and using concealed flak batteries. Gabreski studies each movement, adjusting attack vectors, ordnance timing, and approach angles. He documents each sortie meticulously, providing invaluable lessons for fellow pilots and future tactical doctrine. Each successful mission further validates the Frankenplane's modifications: reinforced armor, additional fuel capacity, and flexible ordnance mounting. The broader strategic impact becomes clear. By mid-September, Gabreski's low, level ground attack operations significantly slow German counteroffensives, allowing Allied ground forces to secure critical positions and supply lines in Normandy. Field reports emphasize coordination between air and ground units, highlighting the importance of integrated reconnaissance, precision attacks, and tactical innovation under combat pressure. The Frankenplane becomes emblematic of how adaptability, skill, and detailed planning can turn unconventional equipment into a battlefield advantage. Decades later, historians reference these missions when analyzing the evolution of fighter-bomber tactics. Gabreski's Frankenplane and its operational history are preserved in museum exhibits, mission logs, and veteran accounts. Technical data, photographs, and first-hand testimonies demonstrate how careful modification, tactical precision, and courage intersected to create decisive outcomes. The aircraft's influence is evident in post-war Air Force doctrine, emphasizing durability, firepower, and multi-role capability in strike aircraft. Visitors to aviation museums today encounter detailed recreations of the Frankenplane, annotated with mission timelines, ordnance specifications, and tactical schematics. Scholars and enthusiasts study the data to understand how precise targeting, low-altitude maneuvering, and calculated risk contributed to operational success. The legacy of Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski and his Frankenplane persists not through legend alone, but through records, analysis, and preservation that ensure future generations grasp the complexities of aerial warfare. By late September, the pace of operations increases as the Allies push deeper into Normandy, advancing toward Cherbourg and the Cotentin Peninsula. German forces, though battered, remain dangerous and unpredictable. Gabreski's squadron, now seasoned by weeks of low-level attack missions, has developed an almost intuitive understanding of terrain, target identification, and flak patterns. The Frankenplane, once mocked, is now an instrument of surgical destruction. On September 22nd, intelligence reports indicate a large enemy concentration attempting to reinforce positions near the town of Corentin. Estimated strength: 6 Panthers, 8 Panzer IVs, 10 Skieffs, 251 half-tracks, 2 anti-aircraft batteries, and accompanying infantry. Terrain features include rolling farmland, small orchards, and a narrow canal that bisects the main road, providing both cover and choke points. Gabreski studies aerial photographs carefully, noting faint tire tracks, subtle soil disturbances, and shadows indicating tank turrets concealed under netting. At 6:35 that morning, he climbs into the cockpit. Engine warm, instruments checked, rockets and bombs secured, machine gun belts tensioned. The weight of responsibility is familiar. Every mission carries the potential for decisive impact or costly misjudgment. He signals his squadron to follow formation, but makes it clear that the first dive will be executed alone to disrupt the column before the enemy disperses. By 6:50, the column is visible through a low, hanging mist. Gabreski identifies the lead Panther approximately 400 yards ahead, turret facing north. He dives to fund 200 feet, engine screaming, and aligns his first rocket salvo. Two Tvars strike the engine deck, the lead tank erupts in flames. Another rocket disables a flanking Panzer IV. Simultaneously, he opens fire with the .50 caliber Browning machine guns, cutting through thinner armor on half, tracks, and command vehicles. Smoke rises in thick plumes, chaos ensues below. Enemy anti-aircraft fire is intense but disorganized. One .37 shell explodes 45 feet beneath his wing, sending vibration through the fuselage and spraying dirt and debris. The Thunderbolt shudders, but the reinforced frame and pilot skill keep the aircraft controllable. Gabreski pulls up sharply, banking to reassess the battlefield, his eyes scanning for secondary threats. He identifies a concealed flak emplacement behind a low hedgerow, angle calculated 4 degrees downward from his current altitude. He dives again, unleashing another rocket salvo, obliterating the gun position and scattering infantry attempting to man it. Minutes later, his wingmen follow in staggered formation, engaging remaining vehicles. Gabreski monitors each run, providing radio guidance and coordinating timing to maximize destruction while minimizing exposure. He observes 2 remaining Panthers attempting to retreat across a canal bridge. He signals for one wingman to focus on suppressing infantry while he approaches for a final rocket strike. At 900 yards, he fires a single HVR. The rocket strikes the lead Panther mid-turret, detonating ammunition and leaving the vehicle a smoldering ruin. The trailing Panther attempts to reverse but stalls in the mud. A second HVR completes the destruction. By mid-morning, the column is entirely neutralized. Allied ground forces report minimal interference as they advance, able to secure critical roadways and crossings. Intelligence officers confirm over 30 enemy vehicles destroyed, dozens of personnel casualties, and a complete disruption of the German reinforcement plan. The operational impact is profound, directly affecting the momentum of the campaign in northern Normandy. Gabreski returns to base, landing precisely at 10:30. The Frankenplane bears scars from repeated low-altitude strikes, minor dents, scrapes along the wing roots, and heat discoloration near the exhaust stacks. Maintenance crews immediately commence post-mission inspection, logging each ordnance impact, structural strain, and mechanical wear point. Every detail is noted for historical and technical analysis. Colonel Allen commends Gabreski personally, noting that the operation demonstrates not only individual skill but also the strategic value of adaptive aircraft modification. The Frankenplane is no longer a curiosity, Allen says. It's an instrument of battlefield precision, and you've proven it under the most demanding conditions. Gabreski nods quietly, acknowledging the praise but remaining focused on operational readiness. In the weeks that follow, Gabreski continues to fly ground attack missions in support of advancing Allied forces, each sortie reinforcing lessons learned from prior engagements. His reports, meticulously detailed, include exact times of engagement, target distances ranging from 200 to 900 yards, rocket and gun trajectories, and enemy response patterns. Tactical analysis indicates an evolving understanding of German countermeasures, dispersed armor, camouflaged artillery, and deceptive decoy vehicles. Gabreski adapts accordingly, refining attack angles, approach altitudes, and ordnance selection. The Frankenplane, meanwhile, becomes a symbol of ingenuity and resilience. Pilots within the 56th Fighter Group study its modifications, discussing reinforced armor, fuel load optimization, and ordnance versatility. The aircraft's effectiveness inspires other pilots to consider adaptive solutions for their own planes, though none replicate it in exact form. The patchwork fuselage, once ridiculed, now represents combat-tested innovation. Decades later, Gabreski's missions in Normandy are referenced in military history texts, aviation journals, and museum exhibits. Technical drawings, photographs, and first-hand accounts illustrate how the Frankenplane's modifications, reinforced armor plating, optimized rocket racks, and durable engine performance, contributed to operational success. Students of military aviation study his approach to low-level attack, situational awareness, and precise targeting, recognizing the integration of skill, innovation, and tactical acumen. Gabreski retires from the United States Air Force with distinction, leaving behind a legacy defined not by fame, but by precision, innovation, and the tangible impact of his missions. The Frankenplane itself, though disassembled after the war, is meticulously documented. Scale models, photographs, and surviving components are preserved in aviation museums. Exhibits highlight its operational record, technical specifications, and the broader significance of adaptive aircraft design under combat conditions. Visitors to these museums encounter not only the story of a single pilot and his aircraft, but also a lesson in the value of meticulous planning, technical mastery, and adaptability under pressure. The narrative underscores how disciplined execution, even in the face of unconventional equipment or skepticism from peers, can decisively shape battlefield outcomes. Today, Gabreski's Frankenplane continues to inspire pilots, historians, and enthusiasts alike. Study his missions for insights into effective air-ground coordination, precision engagement, and combat innovation. By preserving this history through detailed records, artifacts, and educational outreach, the legacy of Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski remains a living testament to skill, courage, and ingenuity in the face of adversity. For modern viewers and students of history, like, subscribe, and comment. Share your connection to these missions, reflect on the lessons of adaptability and precision. and honor the memory of those who shaped the outcomes of one of history's most pivotal campaigns.